Good evening. I'm David Smith, and this is Week in Review. This week we'll be discussing the Affordable Health Care Act finally reaches the Supreme Court for its opening arguments. Also, we'll be discussing a Maryland decision in the issue of the Second Amendment. And of course, we'll be continuing our discussion of Marx, socialism, and utopianism. Good evening again. As we begin our program this evening, our 22nd episode, I'd like to remind everyone of our Twitter hashtag, WIRTV, and our email address, David, Eric, or Daniel at weekinreview.tv. I'd like to start off with the fact that the Affordable Health Care Act, known as Obamacare, is set for opening arguments in the Supreme Court of the United States on Monday morning. This is an important landmark hearing that the court is going to be having. In fact, it is one of the longest opening arguments in the last 45 years. No one will be able to know anything about it until the end of the day. And the gallery has filled up with all the press passes that were available, and it's going to be a very interesting discussion in the court. What do you think about that, Eric? You've been sort of following this as well as I have.
Yeah, well, I'm glad they finally rushed it to the Supreme Court. Well, like I said, like all of us, we're interested in the decision. When do you think they should reach a decision?
I don't know. I don't know if the court is going to avoid, making a decision until after the election, or reach a decision by the end of their term in July.
Okay, so that's one interesting thing, and the other interesting thing is going to see how each judge votes.
Yeah, it seems to be. I think Kennedy seems to be the swing vote. They're considering him to be the one they can't quite peg.
That's pretty much what it's all going to come down to, is one vote.
Yeah.
I mean, I hope some of the other justices decide not to vote their party hack and vote, the law, but otherwise it looks like the Constitution depends on one vote.
That's true. That's true. So it'll be interesting. I'm just not sure how long the hearings will go. This could continue for maybe a month. There's quite a bit to be covered, and you have more than 26 states who are challenging the law as being unconstitutional. So each of them, I don't know how they're going to present the plaintiff's side. Of course, the Solicitor General will defend it on behalf of the Obama administration.
This should be also kind of a lesson to the legislatures, is not to pass something this big without bipartisan support.
Oh, yes. It's just a huge bill in and of itself, and the court's going to have to read through all of it and consider each and every argument of opposition. It's going to be very difficult. So I'm not expecting that the court will issue a decision until after the election.
Okay.
So
we're all waiting.
We'll have to wait and see, but this will be a big topic in the general election season coming up, and of course in the continuing primaries. The other issue I wanted to briefly comment upon and discuss was a federal district court in Maryland has issued a decision regarding Second Amendment rights. The state of Maryland has a law that says you have to have a reasonable and sufficient cause to carry a gun. And the federal district court said that is unconstitutional, that the Second Amendment, the right, is a reasonable and sufficient reason in and of itself. So I thought that was interesting. The court got that one right.
Yeah, Yeah, like I said, we should always report when the court gets it wrong and when they get it right.
Now, they definitely got that one right. And
yeah, well, I think even though the justices say they don't take anybody's opinion or anything, I think they definitely can feel the wind blowing.
yes. Plus, it's just good sound. You know, if you read the amendment,
Yeah.
You know, in the Bill of Rights, it's very clear
Yeah.
that there's
It's
no
very
other
clear.
requirement than you have the right. You know, you don't have to
Yeah.
justify it in any way.
No. No.
There's no just and reasonable cause except that it's a right that you have.
Mm.
So, I thought that was an interesting.
Yeah, that is an interesting case. Yeah, I know after that Supreme Court case about the right to bear arms, yeah, it was going gun control, now it's going the other way.
Yes.
But like I said, people all of a sudden have started reading the Constitution again and saying, hey, wait a minute.
Yeah,
What's
they're
going
you know,
on?
the justices are having to look at those things, and people are, you know, beginning to understand what their rights are and what the Constitution is and what it says. So.
And of course, that's, as we said, that's the whole point of the court is to be an advocate for the people against the government, against an oppressive government. They stopped doing that, they're worthless.
And the Obama administration has been very, has had a forward momentum in trying to suppress gun rights and the right to bear arms and so forth.
Yeah, speaking of that, somebody needs to get some answers out of somebody in the Justice Department about the whole gun running issue.
Yeah, well, you know, I think they're trying to get Eric Holder, you know, through this term, and then I think we'll see if Obama is reelected, we'll get a new Attorney General, definitely.
Yeah,
He's
well, I think Holder should be
extradited
I think he should be extradited to Mexico because that's where the real crimes took place. And they could question him.
Mexico may ask for his extradition. You know, they may ask for it if they decide to hold their own.
They should ask for it.
Court proceedings.
Because I'm wondering if Holder armed these people out of the goodness of his heart, or if somebody got paid. This just reeks of corruption.
Oh yeah. Well, and remember, Eric Holder was President Obama's personally hand-picked choice for Attorney General. Sort of like the Solyndra thing, and you know, just everything he seems to touch turns to manure.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think the Democratic Party is definitely good. If they lose this election, they're going to definitely have to do something to rehabilitate their image of being more than a crime cartel.
Well, I don't know. Now they've got Rick Santorum saying it would be better to have Obama reelected than Mitt Romney elected.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of
I've heard of being a sore loser, but that's going a little too far.
Yeah, Santorum is beginning to lose track. The election's not about him; it's about the American people.
Yeah. Well, let's continue our discussion. We weren't quite finished, I don't believe, with Marx and utopianism and that whole topic.
Yeah, let's talk about utopianism because you have a provisional definition of ethics. It's not the best, but it's not the worst, but it'll get us started. Ethics is usually abstracted practices, behaviors, and activities that society accepts or rejects to further the aims of the society. This is why, like the framers of Art and Hegel and others said, that government should have no aims because it becomes coercive. Its only aim should be for its citizens to reach their potentials. But, I mean, this, of course, doesn't always work out. I mean, if you have a war, of course, the government has to have an aim to protect the people, and that's why wars, rights are restricted, liberties are restricted, but it's supposed to be temporary. But if you have a utopia, then you got to start. This is why liberals keep messing with the morality. They're trying to bring about utopia, and they're trying to do this through changing the ethics. So let's talk about the contraception issue, since it seems to be the big issue right now. You and I discussed this earlier this week. In the utopia that Marx and Engels and all the utopians say after Marx promised us, since you don't get to go to heaven, there has to be some draw to it. And sex is that draw, free sex, meaningless sex, sex without responsibility. So now we can see why the liberals are so focused on this contraception issue and attack conservative women.
Well, that's the whole, that from the 60s and 70s was sexual license, the revolution was we need to be able to have sexual license without, in a consequence-free environment, which was the argument for promoting contraception on a large scale and abortion on a large scale. There should be no consequence to your action.
Oh, yeah. Well, like I said, since, as we discussed earlier, and we'll get to Calvin, I'm sure we have more to say about good old John Calvin. The Utopian's basically a Calvinist turned inside out. Calvin hated sex, so they love sex. So now we can know why the liberals attack conservative women. We remember David Letterman called Sarah Palin a slutty flight attendant look.
Well, where's all the protest? So now, just as an aside here for a moment, where's all the protest against David Letterman, calling for advertisers to withdraw from his show?
Yeah.
I mean, if it's good for Rush Limbaugh, and I don't particularly like Rush Limbaugh at all, but if it's good enough for him, why is it not good enough for David Letterman?
That's just part of the double standard in our society. Like I said, if you're doing something to promote utopia, they don't care how underhanded it is.
Well, I think that's part of this attempt to break down the morality of the society. Is there's no justice. Yeah. Everyone knows that this is an unjust behavior. If it's good for one, it's good for the other, and this creates confusion in the populace. We don't have a standard of what's right and what's wrong anymore. It just becomes your personal feeling.
And then what we subsequently found out about David Letterman, that he was having sex with every intern and every woman who was employed by him. If she had been a slutty flight attendant, of course, he would have loved her.
Yes, which is another...
Then the other incident that got me thinking about this is, I don't know, probably almost no one remembers this, but Bristol Palin did a tour of some high schools sponsored by the Candy Shoes people, where she was promoting abstinence. Now let me tell you this straight. She didn't say anything about contraception either way. She just left that out. It wasn't like she was saying, don't use contraception or use contraception. She just left that out. She said, just think about abstinence. When you're allowed that date late at night, you're weak, just think about the consequences. That's all she was saying.
Well, that was the big opposition to the abstinence campaign in the Reagan years as well. The Reagan and Bush years, they applied it to drugs, but it also applied to just say no.
Yeah.
Take control of your own destiny, your own life, and don't let
people influence you.
Yeah, don't let other people determine your behavior.
Yeah.
To manipulate you through propaganda or peer pressure or something like that.
Yeah. Well, after I was watching this, I happened to turn on CNN, and Jane Velez Mitchell was there going insane about this issue. I mean, I felt like you. It's the most forgettable thing that's happening. So what? Bristol Palin's going to high school. But she was going insane. I couldn't figure out why. I mean, who really cares? Then I realized that if you're going to have this sexual paradise of sex without consequences, you got to get the women to go along. And conservative women, I hate to put it this bluntly, don't put out. That ruins your whole sexual paradise.
Well, because that was, when you look at it, the ultimate goal of the communist ideology is to take us back to a primitive state where
romanticized
we're living, we're romping through the fields, smoking dope, fornicating, and there's no responsibilities anymore.
No responsibility, yeah, and of course it's a romanticized back to state of nature, because we know tribes are always in danger of getting wiped out. They have all kinds of responsibilities.
So that's
Also, yeah. Well, also, plus we found out with sexual license, even though liberals may not want to admit it, some women are better at getting men and some men are better at getting women. There's no equality there anyway.
That's true. That's true. So they're, and of course they're going to try. How do you force that equality?
Yeah, how do you force that
because
equality?
you have to. If you're going to create a utopian society, everything has to be equal.
Yeah, so like I said, even the homeliest guy should be able. Remember the big attack on Kerry Prejean? It's like, who cares?
Well, that's an interesting perspective. That's very. I hadn't thought of that before, but I think you're right. That's an interesting point of view. It has to be considered.
When does anybody get their viewpoints from a beauty queen? Who cares what she thinks? But anyway, that she was attractive and conservative, of course, just drove them completely nuts. Yeah. Like I said, conservative women are the main holdout for this utopia, I guess, in their minds. The women don't go along with it. It's not going to work.
Well, the problem is the women are not, by instinct, are not going to go, because they're oriented toward family, which, of course, is one of the principal institutions that socialism wants to break down in order to bring you to the communist paradise.
Oh, yeah. Well, you remember Wilhelm Reich. He wrote a book on the sexual revolution in Russia, and it was short-lived because they started having all the problems that, we had, plus more. The spread of STDs, and of course at that time they didn't really have all the remedies we have now. I remember it was Salvarsan and the more primitive medicines back then. Yeah. So they cut it off. They had to cut it off, but they did try it as an experiment. And of course we can see a lot of this comes out of Marx's own life, is that he was pretty much having sex with everybody he could, including his daughter.
It just seems to be this disordered individualism.
Yeah.
That they want to impose. Well, they want no one to impinge upon their ability to do whatever they want. Yeah. But they want you to be conformed to that yourself, even if you're opposed to it.
Yeah, well, it's a primitivism. We talk about the primitivism, but like I said, they don't want to be like a real primitive culture, because most real primitive cultures have all kinds of extremely enforced sexual taboos and, totems. They want it to be this romanticized. What they're really looking for is a return to childhood. I don't know if you've ever looked at one of George Lakoff's books. Anybody who's out there, you can just open any one of them, any page, and it just hits you that this is a return to childhood fantasy. They want to go back to the time when there was no responsibility. They were children. In other words, when you domesticate an animal, what's the first thing you have to breed out of it? You have to breed out of it becoming an adult. That's why you can't keep wolves as pets, because a wolf becomes an adult and it'll tear your face off, That's the first thing that has to be bred out of a domestic animal, is the adulthood. So this is what they're trying to do. It's a return to fantasy. Return to childhood fantasy. They want to be perennial children with no responsibility.
Which is what we see reinforced continuously in television programming. And it's flights of fantasy, and the children are glorified, and the parents are minimized and portrayed as ignorant, foolish, out of step, boorish.
Plus, any trouble they get magically just works out fine.
And a constant attempt to portray women in masculine roles, which, of course, men are more promiscuous than women, back to the sexual thing. Women, in order to be like a man, have to be sexually promiscuous, which is entirely against the feminine nature.
Well, I don't know. Ann Coulter is someone I think some stuff she wrote is good, some stuff she wrote is bad. But she wrote a critique of Sex and the City. And she said what it really is they're having gay men masquerade as women. That's who acts like the women on Sex and the City.
Interesting interpretation. That's.
Women, you don't sit around and talk about sex all day and have promiscuous sex with everyone. Yeah. But anyways, it's an interesting interpretation. Like I said, take it what you will. But yeah, the primitivism is basically a return to childhood fantasy that they have, that they can just be taken care of. So who becomes the god or the parent? The government. The government has to, because a domesticated animal needs a master. You know what happens when you throw a domestic animal out in the wild? It gets eaten. You throw a French poodle into a wolf pack, what happens to that French poodle?
Well, that's true. That's true. Which is the...
Yeah, so if you're going to turn everybody into a domesticated animal, well, there has to be a master to take care of them. And that's why they want this all-powerful, centralized, godlike government. But they don't seem to realize once you're turned into a domestic animal, what do domestic animals do? They work, we breed them for our amusement, and we eat them.
Which now, looking at the connection with Calvin, that was very much how he viewed the function of the state, is to keep everyone corralled in the Christian religion, and to very carefully monitor and control their actions in order to keep them on the straight and narrow.
Yeah, I heard that he even had like block monitors or something that would keep everybody in line. It would go all the way up. He had like this elaborate spy system.
Oh yes, everyone was. Well, that was what I was saying last week. You know, if you wanted to live in a repressive regime, if you think the Roman Inquisition, you had to be turned into them by someone. You know, in John Calvin, they had spies everywhere in Geneva, and all of a sudden one night, someone would burst in your door and haul you off before the city courts, and you would be, put in the public stocks, or you'd be whipped, or you'd be exiled. But you had no privacy, which sort of came over with the Pilgrims when they came over to North America. Pilgrim society was very repressive, and everyone was looking out for how you were behaving, and it became a sort of panopticon type of society.
Yeah. Well, I have actually, while reading about Johann Valentin Andrea, I guess Andrei, I don't know exactly how it's pronounced, but he wrote one of the early utopias. It was after Thomas More's, but before Francis Bacon's New Atlantis, and it was a visit to Calvin's Geneva that inspired him to write Utopia.
Well, Geneva was anything but a utopia. Of course, as with all utopian schemes, they always fail.
Yeah, well,
because coercion applied to human beings in that manner always causes them to rebel. You get this huge underground swell of resistance.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it was a repressive regime, but Andrei was a. Well, you want to say another severe cleric, Christian minister, Protestant minister. So yeah, it seemed like paradise. No one swore. No one was dressed immodestly.
Which is exactly what's happening with the Christian right in this country. The extreme right with Rushduni and his followers who want to actually create a theocracy based on Old Testament law.
Yeah.
And that's a frightening thing, and many of these right-wing fundamentalists in our country subscribe to that.
Well, yeah. Well, that's what we were saying. If you turn a liberal inside out, you get a Calvinist. If you turn a leftist liberal inside out, you turn a Calvinist inside out, you get a leftist liberal.
And the rest of us are trapped somewhere in the middle, trying to live our lives.
Yeah, the rest of us just want to live our own lives according to our own, without bothering anybody, to just realize our own potentials.
Yes, that's one of the. That's and of course, the insanity of a bunch of. I still don't get this. Why a bunch of fundamentalist Protestants are backing and promoting Rick Santorum. It's not based. It's simply based on the fact that he represents their particular utopian vision.
Yeah, yeah. I think that Santorum and a lot of his followers have lost sight of what this election about. It's about us. It's not about who we elect. It's about getting Obama out. But it's not about the personality cult. It's about the change of policy.
So that's
I think Rick Santorum forgot this, that this election's not about him. It's about the policies.
So the theocrats and the socialists are fighting each other. And,
Well, of course.
And this keeps us from really dealing with the important issues.
Yeah.
You know, policy issues
Right.
and things. How can we fix the banking crisis that we have?
Yeah. How we fix finally the economy, which Obama claimed that was his special know-how.
Well, the whole fix for the economy is very simple. And it has nothing to do with budgets or budget deficits, or it has to do with reforming the banking system is what needs to be done. And that never gets discussed because we're always arguing about spending and so on. And these social issues, these divisions between socialists and theocrats, which they're all going to spend the money. It's just what they're going to spend it on.
Yeah.
Is the issue.
Well, yeah, you got to ask yourself some questions. Why are we still in Afghanistan? Why isn't John Corzine in jail? Because it's not in the interest of the money people. I'm sure there's contractors making huge sums of money off of our war on Afghanistan.
Well, they're going to be making huge amounts of money off our war with Iran, is just what they're...
Yeah. Yeah.
Or whatever war is going to take place there.
Whatever war, yeah.
You know, but something's going to happen over there that's going to draw us in.
Yeah.
Because our whole economy now is based on war.
Yeah.
And we don't have any manufacturing. We don't have any industry.
No.
It's we're even losing the information aspects because of the suppression of the internet and this arguing over copyright and so on. So.
Oh yeah, well, copyright laws need to be fixed. It's ridiculous.
Well, it just needs
it's not supposed to be a lifetime.
You know, it needs
it's not supposed to be a lifetime title.
You know, once you're paid for it, it belongs to, and if they sell it and make a profit off it, that's their benefit. They make a profit.
We don't need eternal copyrights. They got to expire in a reasonable amount of time. Whatever you
20
pick,
years.
25, 50
20 years is quite sufficient. No.
What?
20 years is sufficient. Maybe 10.
I think so. Even if you want, take it anywhere between 20 and 50, but that's it.
Yeah. But
like I said, it's not supposed to be a lifetime benefit.
Well, it's especially not supposed to be given to the person who buys the the product. It's the copyright is only for the person who produced it.
Well, the part that I'm concerned with most is when Congress is going back and re-copywriting public works.
Yeah.
That's frustrating.
Well, that should just be declared by the Supreme Court to be illegal. Because you can't re-copyright. Once the copyright is expired, it's over. You can't go back and re-copyright something so someone can make some financial profit off it because it's part of the culture. It now belongs to the people of the nation. It's part of our culture, our heritage.
That's right. We all believe that the author or the inventor should profit from his product, but after his lifetime, that's it.
20 years or his lifetime, whichever comes first, his death, whichever comes first.
Yeah.
But anyway, this, and gradually, with these socialist policies that are being implemented in our country, and everyone is finally waking up. There's a huge wake-up call. But it's a war between the theocrats and the socialists. And most ordinary citizens are neither. They're neither a theocrat nor are they a socialist.
Most people are not utopians.
No. No, we realize most, the average, the people, the theocrats are trying to to seduce with their idea are actually people who realize that utopia is something that God provides in the next life. What you're supposed to do here is do the best you can, get the greatest benefit, and do the greatest good and the least amount of harm.
Yeah. So yeah, it's the utopianism. But like I said, you actually got to study what these utopias will look like, and then it begins to fall into place why they're doing the things that they do. Because when I saw, like I said, Jane Velez Mitchell going insane over Bristol Palin going to a few high schools, I didn't register. What's the issue?
I'm curious, Eric, which do you think is the best book to read to understand the utopian vision? Should you read like Thomas More and Marx to get a contrast, or Christotopia and Marx?
Oh yeah, well if you want to read the originals, yeah, you read Christianopolis, The Rosicrucians by Andrei, Utopia by More, and of course the Marxist literature. We're fortunate actually that a radio host here, national radio host Mark Levin, has just written the book, A Meritopia, for people who are interested in utopias.
That was Mark Levin, and the title is
Mark
Meritopia,
Levin.
Right?
A Meritopia, yeah.
Okay. Is it on Kindle
book.
and Nook, so you can go purchase it at Barnes & Noble?
Oh yeah, you can purchase it anywhere. It was actually on the New York Times bestseller list for a while, yeah. It's an excellent book, and it'll get you started, but it's a start. You should read more, of course, on your own.
Well, I think it's important for people to start reading these works, modern and older, so that we can understand what is happening. We have a copy of the book cover up on the screen right now. It's also apparently available as an probably an e-book, and it looks to be a audiobook as well.
Yeah.
Because on the cover it says read by, and it has the reader.
Yeah.
So,
and of course, like I said, you should definitely, if you're really interested in getting into the subject, you should read some of Andrea's writings, and look at Calvin's Geneva.
now I've got a question for you. And it has to do with Calvin and the Institutes of Religion and the Protestant Reformation. Do you feel that, now it's my belief that Islam is simply a Christian heresy. And I'm wondering if the Protestant Reformation is an Islamic heresy, especially Calvinism. It's a return to this fatalism that dominates Islamic philosophy and theology.
Mm.
But it's a fatalism without God.
Well, it's definitely, I'm looking into it as you are. They definitely see some hot leads in there. Like I said, I don't want to commit to anything yet, but it's a topic that needs to be researched.
I found it's kind of a tenuous parallel as I've thought about it, because in Calvinism you have God's sovereign will directing everything. You have an outside being doing it. In communism, it seems to be this movement that begins with evolution, and its eventual outcome is this communist paradise. It seems to be an impulse of nature rather than any movement of a divine being, and therefore it probably takes quite a bit longer.
Well, the government becomes a divine being. That becomes the ruling sovereign.
The government takes the place of God and becomes but it's moving us toward this ultimate expression of human nature.
Like you said, like we were talking about, Geneva is probably one of the first experiments to turn men into domestic animals.
Yeah, because everyone you were told what you were to do, how you were to do it, when you were to do it,
everything.
And any deviation brought the same punishments that you couldn't really find a difference between the communist punishment of being sent to the gulag as opposed to Calvinists being exiled or shipped off to another Calvinist city that was more strict. I don't know that you get a Calvinist city more strict than
Well, I'm sure if John
Geneva.
Calvin could have lived a few hundred years, he would have actually gone into selective breeding, I have no doubt.
Yeah. Well, and that's the whole idea behind transhumanism right now. Is we got to breed the defects out of human beings, and if we have to use technology to do it, so that's the selective breeding process that's being advocated right now, is the transhumanist idea.
There's a lot of things to start looking at. That's what we're here for, to tell people to open their eyes and start looking around. Some of these things will be good, some bad, but you got to start looking around at them, and they need to be discussed openly.
Yeah, I agree with you. Well, we've decided on a new format. We're going to do 2 shows, 2 weeks, and then we're going to take a week off to do research and investigation into the next topic we'll be bringing up that following week. So we will not air next week, but we will be back on the air. Our next program, our 23rd episode, will be March the 6th. If any of you have a topic you want us to discuss, investigate, please let us know. Our Twitter hashtag again is WIRTV, and our email is David, Daniel, or Eric at weekinreview.tv. So please give us your comments. We appreciate the comments that we received on last week's episode. The feedback is very helpful. Please let us know what you're thinking and give us new ideas. And once again, I'm David Smith. This is Week in Review. We'll see you again on March 6th. Have a good evening.
Oh, hi. I'm your yes vote on the health care reform bill, and I've come back to haunt you.